Chris A. Williams joins me here today. You can find him on most of the socials looking for I am Chris A. Williams, especially Instagram and YouTube. So I'm going to have those as clickable links in the show notes. Really appreciate your time, Chris. We're going to be talking. You're an oddity because you're one of the few people that have been a realtor, a broker, and actually are investing in real estate as well.
Mhm.
So we're going to be talking about that journey and everything in between. We really appreciate your time here today.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to this episode. I'm looking forward to giving the people some things of value. Hopefully, you guys investors can learn something from me and get insight. Like you mentioned, I'm an agent, but I am we call ourselves unicorn agents, I'll say. I'm very investor friendly, know things about investing. And same thing with my agents. I teach them to be the same way also.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting because I have run into realtors that it's almost like I'm in some sort of competition with them, and I'm actually not that
Yeah.
interested in that.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because kind of how I scale my business, I started as a real estate agent and then I switched over to team lead and then company owner and things like that. And then I still have my license active, but I always tell people I prefer not to sell houses just because there's so much more opportunity on the investing side versus just, being an agent and commissions and all of that jazz.
So, talk a little bit about that regarding, is that a mindset shift for you? Was that just, as realtors and brokers, are investors just the bane of your existence? Why the resistance to working with investors?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was just talking about this with one of my partners in the brokerage who's a big investor himself also. And I think the issue is a lot of agents, it's ego. A lot of agents just have so much ego and they act like the gatekeepers. And it's very unfortunate because a lot of times they put their sellers in disadvantaged situations because they're like, hey, we have to list this home. And a lot of homes shouldn't be listed based on the condition, based on the seller's needs and so on. And that agent, they could actually work with an investor and be able to close this deal for the seller and they could still get paid from it. But a lot of times they're unwilling to do that because they feel like, hey, I need to be driving the ship. And if I don't know about a subject, then they think it's illegal or they think that is something that shouldn't be done. So I've even ran into that on my side too. And I have to let agents know that, hey, I'm not only a licensed agent, I also own a brokerage too. So anything I'm saying, this is not illegal. This is something that can be done. And many people have done it. But I will say, definitely want to give a big shout out to those agents that are willing to learn about it, that are willing to do that. And be honest with you, like I closed one last month, the subject to deal, and the agent said, I have no idea what this is. I've never done this, but let's do it. And we were able to walk her through the process and the deal closed. Everybody was able to get paid and satisfied.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because when you do work with some realtors that get it, it's a great situation because in my market, we've built some strong relationships with a few.
Hmm.
And like you said, there are properties that frankly shouldn't be listed in the condition they are in.
Exactly.
But bringing in somebody like a seasoned investor, somebody who knows what they're doing, we will do what we can to, if it's a good fit, close on the property, fix it up, and then even relist it with the agent who brought it to us.
I think agents need to keep their options open to that also. Just because you don't get paid now necessarily from this deal, you can get paid a lot more after the flip is done. And once you have that listing, that can lead you to further clients also. And then you're building a relationship. So as an investor, you're not only going to do one deal the whole entire year, but you're going to do more deals. And then investors usually have a tighter knit network and such. So it's like, okay, this is my agent in this specific region. You're like, hey, I trust this agent. You let your investor friends know that also. And before you know it, that agent is having 4, 5, 6 listings a month just by doing that. So I think agents, they just have to get the long term vision instead of just thinking short sighted when it comes to their commissions.
When I got your initial information, one of the things that stood out is the accolades that you have racked up.
Thank you.
I noticed Hampton Roads Realtor Association Circle of Excellence, top 500 agents out of nearly 10,000, most prominent agent award. And we're going to get to this last one here soon, the social media master marketing award. Being that you've seen this level of success in being a realtor broker,
Mhm.
was it just not producing the level of income? Or what caused you to really kind of pursue the investing piece of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Honestly, just the way my mindset is, I just like to think bigger and I just like to think better, right? So as an agent, I feel like I was capped necessarily, not just income, but with everything. Like I like to have live a certain lifestyle, do certain things. And the more houses you start having to list, the more clients you start having to work with. Okay, now you're restricted because we only have 24 hours in a day. So if I have, let's say, 10 clients that I'm working with, goodness gracious, my whole day is going to be consumed with those clients. I may want to rent a seller. They may decide, I just had this happen a few months ago where the appraisal came in $20,000 under the list price. Seller was like, I'd rather rent it at this point. So all that work that you've done at that point, it basically gets wasted. So I was kind of sick and tired of dealing with that and just all the headaches and dramas that come with being a real estate agent. And I knew the real wealth, the real power comes with being a real estate investor. So honestly, I mean, I just started real estate investing last year, but I should have done it probably 3 years prior, to be honest with you. Like the biggest hiccup for me was rehab numbers. I read so many books, listened to all the podcasts, watched all the YouTube videos about rehab numbers. I could still not grasp it. But it got to the point where I was like, all right, man, like this is ridiculous. You need to just do it. And I just did it.
You mentioned kind of having a mindset around being a realtor, capping things off. I think we all experience that to a certain level. In fact, I'm experiencing that at the moment regarding some things. Is there anything that you did to just kind of reset your mindset to what is actually achievable?
Yes, 100%. I would say getting in bigger rooms because you mentioned the accolades and things I accomplished so young, especially. A lot of the spaces I was in, I was almost like the big fish. And it's cool, being a big fish, but it's not really productive for you. So I got into rooms where I was a little fish again, at that point, I was making six figures when I was 21 years old. So that's cool and all. But then when I switched my environment, I got around people that were making six figures a month. And that just blew my mind. I was like, people can really make six figures a month. Like, I was like, when they first told me, I was like, there's no possible way. And I was just off of one business that he was telling me about. So I'm like, dang, this is really doable. So I just basically saw what people that were more successful than me were doing. And I just decided to follow their footsteps. And one thing that people who were making six figures a month plus, they weren't just day-to-day agents, they were investing in real estate and investing in other assets and such.
That really does have an impact, doesn't it? We've heard this concept repeated on the show is you are the sum of the people you hang out with
Yeah.
here. And I don't think that really sinks in how that really does impact you.
It does hugely, 100%. I mean, that was probably the biggest change and the most productive change in my life is just switching up the environment, and when you're in those rooms, it can be hard because you can feel intimidated at first. I will say that I definitely dealt with that, but just always be willing to be a student and be willing to learn. That's something that's helped me out tremendously.
So you said you were at first a bit scared of doing this real estate investing thing. Was there ever a pivotal moment or something that happened or new information that came to light that caused you to push you over the edge?
I can't think of necessarily a specific moment. Kind of my journey in real estate, my start in real estate investing was a bit interesting. I didn't just start like cold turkey without knowing anything like that because of what I did as a real estate agent. I had been working with investors for a while and I worked very closely with a specific group of investors. And I had plenty of opportunities, whether it was flips, whether it was wholesale, even buying rental properties. I want to say four transactions in which I had the lead came directly to me. And I ended up giving it to that real estate investment group because I was scared to do it myself. But the benefit in that was I learned how to do the process basically from A to Z. I say I got paid with the knowledge that I was able to learn from being a part of those deals. So once those deals were finished and I kept on getting opportunities, I said, okay, cool. Let me just do this myself. And the first one, like even the first wholesale, the first flip, I was definitely scared, especially that first flip. Goodness gracious. And everything went wrong in that first flip. But, like they say, you buy the deal, you make money how you buy the deal. I brought the deal at a very good price. And despite all the mistakes I made, literally going two times over my rehab budget, I still was able to profit very well from that deal.
Yeah, let's talk about that first deal. What painful lessons were learned?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest lessons I learned was if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it right. You can't cut corners. I did try to cut a corner in an instance where for that specific house, the seller, they had tried to do the remodelers themselves, and they had IKEA cabinets that were already in the house, but they weren't sanded or painted or anything like that. So I wanted to keep those cabinets. And just the way the house was, there was a ton of debris and everything like that, so we didn't have all the parts for it, but the seller said they were in that shed, and I just took their word for it. So, when it came time to actually get in the kitchen, I was like, "Okay, cool, we're just gonna keep those cabinets, let's save money there," and what ended up happening was we didn't have all the parts. Not only did I pay the contractor to finish installing those cabinets, right after I paid him, I had to pay him to remove those cabinets, then I had to pay for him to go to Lowe's to get some more cabinets and install those cabinets. So I was like, man, if I would just took those out, stop trying to cut corners and, saving money, then I could have saved a lot more money that way. That was definitely one of the biggest lessons I learned. A lot of lessons I learned have to do with the specific contractor, things like that. Like you got to be on top of your contractors for sure. I remember I came there one Monday, 10 a.m., and nobody was at the site. So I had a nice phone call with my GC about that, letting them know, hey, this isn't ever going to happen again. Even though you guys don't work Sundays, you're going to start working Sundays now because now we're behind. So yeah, it was a bunch of interesting things that happened with that one. And like I mentioned, the rehab numbers, that was one of the biggest reasons why I didn't get into flips as soon as I should have, because I was confused about the rehab numbers. Even with that deal, I was confused about the rehab numbers. I went 2 times over my rehab budget. Believe I had a 45K rehab budget, my rehab was 90K. So, yeah, that was a lesson there. But like I said before, as long as you buy the deal smart, you can make all the mistakes in the world and you're good to go.
So on that first deal, what did you make?
Yeah, so total net on that was 55K.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, I brought that subject to my entry fee was a lot less than what it should have been versus if I did hard money and I did the rehab out of pocket. When I posted the video on YouTube, it was like, hey, I spent 12K to get a $180,000 check, which I did because the rehab, I paid for the rehab. It all came back to me. At closing, I got a check for about 180K. When we factor in everything net, we're about 55K.
Hey, that's pretty good. At that point, did that start to open things up? Like, 'cause there's been this discussion that I've had with a number of people, like when we got first started, we're doing the wholesaling thing.
Yeah.
You kind of go through the motions, you grind, you believe that this can work, but when that first one actually happens, it's like a light bulb goes off. Oh crap, this actually does work. And then the next one comes a little faster. And then because you start to build confidence in it, the next
Mhm.
one comes a little faster. I think people are attracted to your experience and confidence in it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I would say my first wholesale deal, that's kinda how I felt, because I knew about wholesale, but I didn't really I couldn't grasp the concept of wholesale, and especially my background as an agent. As you probably know, a lot of agents hate wholesalers. They think they're ripping off the sellers and all things like that. I never truly believed that, but when you constantly have that in your ear, you kinda get those thoughts too. So, I mean, after I did my first deal, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is cool. This is pretty easy." And my seller walked away satisfied. Every party was satisfied. So my first one, I think I made 10,000 on that one. First one, regular one, and then the next one I did right after that, I made 75,000 off of that. And then once I made the 75,000 one, I'm like, "All right, like let's let's do this more. Let's focus on this a bit more." Yeah, because in our market, we're not getting commissions for 75,000. I will say that. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that was kind of the light bulb moment, just knowing that, hey, like, it's real, it's doable, and you're helping out everybody. I think that is probably the biggest thing I would say. If agents are watching this too, I've had this discussion with my agents many times. As long as your seller is satisfied, as long as your seller's getting what they want, it doesn't matter how much you make from the deal. It doesn't matter because it's your job as the business person to be able to negotiate your price. For people who get upset about wholesalers and such, would you be upset if they made $5 from the deal? The issue usually lies with people are upset about they're getting such a large assignment fee. But as I said, it doesn't matter how much they're making from the deal because every party is satisfied. They were just able to negotiate their price. And if you have a problem with how they negotiate, then I would say, hey, get better at negotiations, to be honest with you.
Mhm. Yeah, it is kind of interesting how people get hung up on that type of thing, you know? And at first, I completely understand it, but until you get into the mindset that you're actually there to help,
Exactly.
you need to be right with that. And
Yep.
and we've had multiple situations where, especially at first, there many of these people that come to you, they don't feel like they have any other option. They don't have any choice. In fact, I last week I got a property under contract for they were within weeks, like within 2 weeks of losing the house because
Yep.
of past taxes.
Exactly.
Would have walked away with like nothing.
Exactly. Yep. Typical on market, about a 30-day escrow period. So that's not gonna work for a traditional listing. But, working with an investor like yourself, that is their way to go. So I think agents need to understand that more and utilize investors. Like agents, you guys can make so much more money if you utilize investors. And even before I was investing, that is how I had pretty much consistent business per month because I was getting at least 2 listings for my investor that I was working with. So just very consistent.
Just to remind you, you can learn more regarding what Chris is up to. Look on the socials for I am Chris A. Williams. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes for the Instagram and YouTube. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a favor and share this with one of your investor friends. And if you are watching this on YouTube, give me a quick like and subscribe. So, Chris, I'd be curious, based on your experience as a realtor and a broker, and then you're doing some of this wholesaling and a few other things, are
Mhm.
there some intricacies that realtors need to be aware of that okay, if you're going to do this, you do still need to disclose certain things or some of the legalities associated with what you're doing?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very important to be very upfront with your seller about what's going on. I think that is when, investors do get in trouble is when they kind of try to sneak things in and such. And especially if you're a real estate agent or a broker, you have to disclose exactly what's going on. You need to disclose that you do have a real estate license. So in my contract, it states that a principal of my company or myself, I have a real estate license. I also tell them, hey, not only do I just have a real estate license, I actually own a brokerage. So they can that's upfront and letting them know, and that gives them a lot of trust. One thing that I haven't really told many people that a seller, they've never asked me for a proof of funds or EMD, but that's just because they trust me and they trust exactly what I'm gonna give them. So, yes, you gotta disclose that you have a license. Another thing that you need to disclose also too is what is your exit strategy with the property? Now, you don't have to say necessarily, "Hey, I'm gonna be assigning, I'm gonna be flipping it," but they do need to know that these are your different options. I always let the seller know, "Hey, I'm in this for profit. Even though I wanna help you out and I would love to help you out, I also need to profit from the deal. I can't go negative just trying to help you out. I can't zero out just
Mhm.
trying to help you out." So I let them know, "Hey, I need to profit from this deal, and I have multiple ways, whether that's a novation, whether that's listing on the MLS, whether it's assigning it to a partner, wholesale, whether it's flipping it myself, that's all in my contract, and they sign off on it." So when those things do come up, let's say they get the alter, they see the assignment fee, and if there's questions about it or anything, I just let them know, like, "Hey, like, I've let you know up front I'm engaging in real estate for a profit, and this was my specific exit strategy on the deal." So I just think it's super important just to be upfront and transparent with all parties in the process.
You know, it's interesting because there has been, I think that's where some of the wholesalers do get a bad reputation.
Mhm.
And frankly, I've just have learned over time that I just can't convince anybody to sell me anything. It wasn't until you might even mistakenly or inadvertently withhold information because you don't want them to realize the value of their house. But it seems like the more transparent I am regarding those details, the more
Yeah,
often they will sell it to me.
exactly. Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm very upfront with my sellers. So one thing I'll do in my acquisition appointments is I'll always give them a net sheet on exactly what they're going to walk away with. Because you got to remember, I'm an agent, so I have multiple strategies in which to help out this seller. So like I've gone on appointments where I've actually wanted to buy a house, keep it as a rental, and I've done the net sheet. And if they sold it on market, they're going to make 80,000 for it. situations like that, I mean, I can't give you $80,000, you know? So I let him know, "Hey, it's probably better that you list." And that point, you know, it gives a lot of trust because 'cause they're like, "Okay, you know, he's not all in it for himself, he's actually looking out for me." Recently, I had an appointment where the seller, they wanted 350 for it, and I already knew 350 wouldn't work. I actually got them to sign at 275, but I broke it down to them very specifically by pulling comparables, by showing them everything an appraiser would look at, showing them everything that I'm factoring to my investment. I showed them my MAO formula, showed them ARV, all of these things, and they weren't necessarily happy with the price, but they understood it at the end of the day, and they were willing to sign because they understood it. So I think being transparent is super, super important.
I wanted to touch before we move into closing out this episode on the Social Media Master Marketing Award and what
Yes.
that entails. Because looking at your Instagram, I haven't checked your YouTube yet, but I would imagine it's growing rather quickly. Your
Yeah.
Instagram, there's a lot going on there, and you got quite a
Thank you.
few followers. What caused you to win this award? And do you have any tips for us? Most of us investors are a bit outdated and behind on this whole concept of the socials.
Yeah, I would say you guys gotta get on socials, man. Pretty
Hmm.
much all of my investment deals have came from socials. Like, I don't have a VA, I don't have, you know, I'm not on deal machine sort, I'm not driving for dollars, none of that. It's just people that are reaching out on socials, whether it's them themselves or whether they know somebody. You know, people will literally reach out and say, "Hey, there's this abandoned house on the corner where my dad lives at. Like, here's the address for it. This is something you're probably interested in." So I love social media because it's like your resume and also it's like workers constantly working for you. And I found that out on the real estate agent side, you know, back years ago when that was my focus because I would have lenders that reached out to me in different states. You know, they're sending me an email at 3 a.m. in the morning. Obviously, I'm not up, you know, I'm asleep. And they send me an email at 3 a.m. in the morning, say, "Hey, we saw your videos on social media. I've got a client that's getting deployed to your state. You know, they want to work with you now because of content that they saw." So I was like, "Okay, this works great as a real estate agent, so it can do the same exact thing as a real estate investor." So I would encourage everybody to get on that journey, just post on social medias, even though it can be awkward at first. You know, I post a lot on socials. I have a whole marketing team, videographer, all of that. But as they'll tell you, I hate being on camera. I hate posting. I hate doing all of that, to be honest with you. But I know it's what brings in the money. So I'm going to keep on doing it.
Well, there's a discipline associated with it too, right? Do have to release something on a fairly regular basis.
Yes, you do. I think every person's strategy is a bit different. The more successful people I see, they're posting bare minimum one time a day. For me, that's a little too much. I've gotten a little bit better. I used to do once a week, but the marketing team has told me, "Hey, we need to be posting more." So we're doing multiple times a week now. I think it's just different strategies. And then I think a big takeaway also too is to remember, and this is what people get so hung up on, is they're like, "Well, I don't want my audience, the people that I know, I don't want them to think I'm doing too much." You gotta remember with social media, you're not trying to reach your followers. You're trying to reach all the people who don't follow you yet, all the people who don't know about you yet. Like, I've made videos where I'm like, "Dang, man, I've said this literally 20 times already. I know I said this 20 times in video," but guess what? Somebody will ask a question about that very specific thing. So for me, that means, okay, you haven't seen all my content yet. And if somebody's asking that, somebody else is asking that same thing. So I think it's important to just keep on putting stuff out, you know? There was a story that I always remember that one person, they were uploading all the time on YouTube and they had 3 subscribers. And they were like, "Man, nobody's looking at my stuff." But one of those subscribers was Oprah Winfrey. So you know, like, you never know who's watching. Don't worry about the follower count. Don't worry about the likes, the views, anything like that. Just keep posting. And I promise you, literally, if you post one time a day for 100 days in a row, you're going to make money. You're going to get a deal out of it. You're going to get an opportunity, at least a lead. You're going to get something out of that. So just do
Mhm.
it.
That's a very important lesson. It's one of those. I saw a. I don't want to. I don't think it was called a meme, but it was a inspirational diagram, if you will, and motivation. When you get excited about something, motivation is high, and your productivity might be high, but then it eventually just kind of dwindles out.
Yeah.
It's that disciplined approach, consistent on an everyday scenario that will result in something. So if you take that persistent, consistent action every single day, you are going to see a deal.
Yes, 100%. I tell my agents that all the time. Like, I don't believe in motivation much, to be honest with you, but I do believe in discipline. I believe in discipline and consistency. So, discipline will show up on those days where you don't feel motivated. And this applies for all aspects in life. I'm in the gym pretty consistently. I run, I read, I do all the stuff outside of just real estate because it helps the real estate. So, for example, ran a half marathon on Sunday. First time ever doing that. So when it comes to, okay, I got to make these calls or I got to build out these processes and such for the real estate company, I just think in my mind, all right, remember how you were feeling during that half marathon? You wanted to give up so bad, but you didn't give up. So why can't you do the same exact thing when it comes to building these processes? So I think it just all applies in life.
Hmm. This is something that occurred to me recently. If I get some sort of momentum in my activities on a regular basis, I almost feel an obligation to keep that momentum going,
Yes.
because if I stop, it's so much harder to get it going again. So
Hmm.
I just try to keep the same amount of activity going every single day in
Yeah.
order to keep that boulder moving.
I agree 100%. And the thing is with that, like, if you stop, you never know when that momentum's going to come back. I believe in life, there's certain opportunities, there's certain times in which everything is gonna work, everything is gonna explode, you're gonna grow. And then there's certain times in life where things are gonna be regular. So in those opportunities where things are exploding, where you have huge growth, I believe in taking advantage of those opportunities as soon as possible, literally as much as possible. It's like the boulder keeps moving or a snowball just keeps coming to my mind. Like as it gets bigger, it keeps flowing. If you let it be, it's not gonna grow anymore. But as it keeps on flowing and rolling, it just gets bigger and bigger.
Right. Well, Chris, this has been such a great conversation. I'm going to just remind everybody again, they can find you on Instagram and YouTube. I am Chris A. Williams. Those are going to be clickable links in the show notes. But before we jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode, is there anything we should have tried to hit on?
I'll say, I know we talked about, how investors kind of think of, or how agents think of investors and things like that. I would say, investor to agents. Like, I think if you guys use agents, that can help you out tremendously. It'll save you a bunch of time also too, because agents will source your deals, and especially if you find the right agent. Now, it can be hard because I think a lot of investors have bad raps with agents because they may be using agents who have been doing it for a while, and agents who are doing it for a while, a lot of times they're stuck in their ways. Especially if they're making really good money or what they think is really good money from commissions, they're gonna be like, investors are a waste of time. That's what my first brokers was telling me, that investors are a waste of time. I didn't really know any better. I'm going off what my broker thinks, and if a random person reaches out, I'm gonna take what my broker says before anybody else. If you're an investor, I would reach out to newer agents, to be honest with you, because the great thing about newer agents is they're young, or maybe they're not young, but they're hungry. They're hungry. They're willing to do all the hard work. They're willing to do the grunt work. They're willing to source the deals. Some will even do driving for dollars for you. Some will even, follow up with the leads, and you can get them with basically not even having to pay them any money up front, just by guaranteeing them, hey, you'll get the listing on the back end. A lot of times they're willing to do that, and they're willing to grow with you. So I would suggest investors like reach out to newer agents. I think that would be a great way to gain consistent business.
But if you're ready, then we'll jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode.
Let's do it.
First one is, what lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
What is a lie that real estate investors constantly tell themselves? I feel like a really big one. The first thing that came to my mind was, when it comes to flips, a buyer won't notice this, or a buyer will overlook this. I think that's the thing that I see a lot, 'cause some flips I walk in, I'm like, "Man, like, what are they doing here?" Maybe it's because 'cause I've been doing this for a while, I can notice, like, certain things, but buyers will also notice it, and even if a buyer doesn't notice it, if they go under contract, guess who's gonna notice it? That home inspector. And then you're wondering why your buyer released, because they got you got a 10-page pickup where you're asking for all these repairs, versus if you just did it up front, you wouldn't have to worry about that. So that's something I took pride in. Like my first flip that I did, there was only 2 repairs they asked from the inspection report. And I already knew what they were gonna be. But yeah, it's just better to do it that way. because if you have to release and go back on market, you're losing money because you're paying more on holding costs. And also, there's no guarantee that you'll find another buyer quickly. You could sit for another month or so. Don't try to cut corners. Just do it as much as possible. A lot of the corners you try to cut, these are really not major repairs either. These are something that can be done that'll help out tremendously.
Mhm. It's one of the better things that we've taken on regarding doing any kind of flipping, for example. If a realtor brought us the opportunity, we will
Mhm.
typically ask them regarding any kind of feedback associated, like if they were doing this project, what should we tackle? They typically have a better grasp of sales history, the neighborhood, amenities, a few things that we may typically miss. We have
For
our
sure.
SOPs, your book of business. This is what we do with every house. But if there's one little extra piece of information we can garner from the realtor, we'll take advantage of it.
That's good.
Do you have a book recommendation or what are you reading right now?
Yes, a lot of books I'm reading right now are more based on business building and business scaling and such. But if I had to give a real estate investing book, my favorite book is Wealth Without Cash by Pace Morby. I read 50 pages of that book and I put my first real estate investment deal under contract, subject to deal that I'm keeping as a long term rental. So I think that's a super helpful book. I've read a lot of different real estate investment books, and a lot of them are very, what's the word? Super like analytical, have a lot of complicated formulas and all things like that. I love that book because it's written literally on, I think, like a 3rd grade or 5th grade reading level. Literally anybody can understand that book and they can understand a super complicated concept like creative financing or subject to. And like I said, it only took me 50 pages before I was like, okay, I know enough to put a deal under contract. And I did it. So I know if I can do it, literally anybody else can do it too.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that be?
Invest more, but invest more into myself. I heard a saying, it was like, a lot of people wanna invest into the S&P 500, invest into the SME 500. Invest into
Hmm.
yourself, man, like, spend money on mentorship, courses, skills, all that's gonna have a much higher return. When I got into stocks and such when I first turned 18 because, I was watching the Warren Buffett videos and things like that, but I was doing like $10 stocks. Like, yeah, I'm investing, I'll possibly get rich when I'm 60, when all that appreciation hits. If I took those investments, that 100 or $1,000 I was spending a month, and I invested that into skills for myself, that would have yielded such a higher return. My mastermind I joined, my very first mastermind last year, that was a $40,000 mastermind. And remember, I had never invested into like masterminds, coaching, anything like that. So that was very tough for me to do. But I'll say, literally, I got my return within 30 days. I did a deal that yielded me more than that within 30 days. And the skills that I've learned from that mastermind is only going to keep compounding. The relationships that I've gained, they're going to keep compounding. So it's even more money just over and over and over. So I would recommend anybody just invest in yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, which you are as a real estate investor, why would you not invest into yourself? You're your most valuable asset at the end of the day.
That's quite profound what you're saying there. I'd be curious as to, was there a period of time where you made that realization and you started to see that investment in yourself as an actual investment versus an expense?
Yes, I would say last year is really what changed all that, to be honest with you. That's where I started thinking of that. Yeah, I started thinking like, hey, like this is an investment back into myself. Like, yeah, it seems like a lot of money up front, but you just got to think about the return at the end of the day. So even like, I mean, investors, if you guys are running paid ads, think of it the same way, basically. Like, yeah, it may seem like a lot of money that you're spending, but what is the return? What's the ROAS on it? So, okay, if you got to spend, let's say 10,000, but you can make even 11,000 from it. All right, you at least got $1,000 return. Now we know if you do it strategically correct, then it's not going to be just $1,000 return. It's going to be much higher. And like I said, it just compounds over and over. So one of the things that I struggled with at first was the fear of the unknown, where I was thinking like, all right, what if I spend this money on myself and it doesn't work out, or it takes a long while to work out? But I think you just have to be patient and just have confidence in yourself also too. So like when I spent the money for that mastermind, I was like, okay, Well, even if I don't do a deal for a year, let's say, some people may calculate that as a loss, but for me, I don't think it's a loss because all the skills that I've learned. So when it's time for me to actually be able to do a deal, I can do it just easy, just like that. And that's exactly what happened. And it didn't even take that long. So once that happened, once I saw that in my life, yeah, I'm willing to invest pretty much anything in myself, at this point, because I just know the return is going to yield for so much higher.
And then finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you or your business?
Social media, 100%. Utilizing social media, that's saved me so much money, so much time on both the investing side and on the real estate company side. How we started this real estate company, like on market side, was by the leads basically that were coming in from social media. We had a few other sources, but it was mainly the social media leads which really grew that company. And the investing side, a lot of that was social media leads and such. Investing in social media, that's been the biggest thing. I would not be here today without, I would probably be out the business, honestly, without social media.
Hmm. Well, I really appreciate your time, Chris. One last time, you can find him on Instagram and YouTube. Look for I am Chris A. Williams. Those are going to be clickable links in the show notes. This was great.
I really appreciate you. I'm so thankful for you having me on. This is a great podcast, and I'm hoping that this can give some value. My goal is I just want to give people as much value as possible. I just put things up for free because I want people to learn and grow and do what they need to do in real estate.